What's one unsolved mystery you'd like to see solved before you die? Antimatter. Why is the universe almost entirely matter, when equal amounts of matter and antimatter should have annihilated each other? Where is the missing antimatter? Is there a slight difference between matter and antimatter particles that causes matter to last longer? Are there places in the universe primarily made of antimatter instead of matter, well outside the observable universe? MH370. I'm sure they'll eventually find the wreckage and have a better idea exactly what happened, but even today they're still finding old World War II ships and even ships older than that. So I hope that it's found before I leave, because I do wonder what happened to that plane. I just hope it's a matter of years or decades, and not centuries. I just want to know who DB Cooper is. I know it's lame, but I'm curious. This was posted by u/Sancta E in another thread. I did not write it, but I think it's a very compelling theory. I'll link the OG comment down below. My money is on Ted Brayden. If you could invent a DB Cooper suspect, you'd invent Ted Brayden. Check it out. Brayden was a paratrooper in World War II, jumped on D-Day with the 101st at age 16, Korea, and Vietnam. He won multiple international skydiving competitions while a member of the Army. 911 logged jumps with the military and was a pioneer of halo jumping. Was recruited to be a team leader in the MACV-SOGs. This was the predecessor to Delta Force and was a multi-service covert military special force run by the CIA. Led squads on covert jumps into Laos, Cambodia, and northern Vietnam from 64 to 67. Did many of these jumps into enemy territory off the aft stairs of, that's right, Boeing 727s. At the time of the skyjacking, the only people who knew this could be done were those involved in these MACV-SOG missions and some employees at Boeing. Was always bitching about how he and his fellow soldiers weren't paid enough. Was always coming up with schemes to make/extort/steal money while in the service. In 1967, he heard about how people were looking for mercenaries to fight in the Congolese Civil War and how well they would be paying, so he went AWOL from Vietnam and made his way to the Congo. The CIA went after him and eventually found and arrested him in the Congo. Was imprisoned at Fort Dix for a very brief time and mysteriously was never convicted of anything, nor tried, and was merely given an honorable discharge and told that he couldn't re-enlist in the military. Once released, he tried to go overseas to be a mercenary again and found out that his name had been blacklisted by the CIA, and so he wasn't allowed to leave the country to be a mercenary. Not knowing how to make a living other than by being a soldier, he resorted to being a truck driver. His trucking company was stationed out of Vancouver. Interesting. When the Cooper hijacking happened, several members of the military contacted the FBI and essentially said this can only be Ted Brayden. Brayden had no family, so there wasn't anyone around to in retrospect said, "Hey, Dad wasn't around during Thanksgiving 1971. His alibi was that he was driving his truck on the plane. Cooper was by everyone who remembered him as being middle-aged or mid-40s. Brayden was 44. Cooper was described as being 5 feet 8 inches 5'10" and slight. Brayden was 5 feet 9 inches and 150 pounds. Cooper was described as being somewhat olive-skinned and swarthy. Brayden's mother's side was Sicilian. Cooper was extremely calm the entire time. The only time he showed any emotion was when he was arguing with the pilots because he wanted to take off from Seattle with the stairs down. They didn't think it could be done. Cooper told them it absolutely could be done and he demanded it be done. The pilots simply refused to do so, thinking it would cause the plane to crash, and Cooper eventually relented. Brayden was described by many of his military colleagues and commanding officers as one of the calmest people under fire you could imagine. Cooper smoked raw e-cigarettes and so did Brayden. Cooper was described by both flight attendants who spoke with him as having either a Midwestern accent or no accent. Brayden was from Ohio. Cooper chose the military parachute over the more modern sport parachute. When asked by the flight attendant why he was doing this, he replied, "I don't have a grudge against your airline, miss, I just have a grudge." Brayden certainly had a grudge against the government for blacklisting him from the only work for which he was skilled at, being a soldier. The alias Dan Cooper. Dan Cooper was the name of a popular 50s and 60s French-language comic book series. The hero, Dan Cooper, skydived into areas to fight the bad guys. What is a country whose official language is French? The Congo. If Brayden was Cooper, then it's extremely plausible that he was exposed to this comic series while serving in the Congo. Following the hijacking. Recent investigation shows that in 1972, despite being a truck driver, he bought his mother a new car as well as a new car for himself, and that he was living in a freaking penthouse in Manhattan. Was arrested in the mid-70s for a major racketeering job in the trucking industry, but like his mysterious release from going AWOL, he was once again given a slap on the wrist and the charges were dropped. His personality. He was always a loner and never had close friends in his life. Men he served with would later say that when they would go to the bars, Brayden would sit at the end of the bar by himself just seeming to sulk. A Green Beret who served with him stated Brayden is among those professionals who appear to have a secret death wish coupled with well-trained instincts for survival. He continually placed himself in unnecessary danger but always managed to get away with it. Another Special Forces member stated he was the perfect combination of high intelligence and criminality. Military tests that he took for entrance into the MACV-SOGs indicated that he likely possessed a genius-level IQ. Couple things to consider. Jumping out of a freaking jumbo jet is no small potatoes. Many of the famous Cooper suspects had been static line paratroopers in World War II or even had no known skydiving experience at all. You'd need to have mega balls to jump out of a jet and also have the skill set to do it. Perhaps most critically, you'd need to know that it could even be freaking done in the first place. There were several Cooper copycats who successfully pulled off similar skyjackings of 727s in the months after Cooper, but to be the guy who first did it? That takes someone special. The suitcase bomb. While this is a common trope you see in movies these days, it wasn't so in 1971. The whole concept of a suitcase bomb required some ingenuity. His calmness is especially noteworthy when you consider that the subsequent copycats were nervous wrecks during their skyjackings, despite being badasses in their own right. Richard McCoy won a Distinguished Flying Cross and a Silver Star in Vietnam as a chopper pilot. He literally flew hundreds of sorties as a chopper pilot. Yet during his skyjacking he was noted, even before he started the skyjacking, for being fidgety and sweating and breathing heavy. Rob Heddy also successfully pulled off a 727 skyjacking. He was a 21-year-old Vietnam paratrooper who served 2 tours in the thickest fighting in Vietnam, and yet he later described himself as being barely able to breathe during his skyjacking. Cooper, on the other hand, sat calmly for 5 hours, smoking cigarettes and drinking his bourbon and coke. With one hand on the detonator, the flight attendant lit his cigarettes for him. It's also worth noting that none of the copycats gave any specific instructions to the pilots on how to fly the 727. They just jumped out with the jet going full speed and it nearly killed 2 of them. What Cooper told the pilots wasn't public knowledge at the time. Cooper told them to fly at 180 knots, wheels down, with flaps at 15 degrees, and at 10,000 feet. That's mighty specific and strongly indicates that Cooper had knowledge of how best to safely parachute out of a 727. Cooper was also the only one to not be caught. Getting caught on his missions with Spec Ops meant certain death. This is a man who knew how to escape situations and blend into his environment. Occam's razor would point toward Ted Brayden being D.B. Cooper. One of the military's most experienced skydivers is kicked out of the service and isn't allowed to pursue a lucrative career as a mercenary, so he uses the skills that the military taught him to ransom $200,000 from the government. I'd like to know what happened to Andrew Gossden. A 14-year-old boy left home in Yorkshire one morning in 2007 dressed in his school uniform, and then withdrew all his money from his bank account. He went back home after his parents had gone to work and changed out of his uniform, then went to the train station and bought a one-way ticket to London, about 2 hours away by train. There is CCTV footage of him leaving King's Cross station, but that's the last time he was seen. He didn't tell his parents he was planning to go to London, and it's never been established why he went there. I'd love to find out he's actually okay, or even if not for his parents to finally find out what happened to him. The disappearance of Willian Tyrell, basically a 3-year-old kid, was kidnapped in his front yard after the foster grandma went inside for a glass of water and she heard screaming from the sister, and when she ran out he was gone. This happens around 2014 and I still remember his face on the news in his Spider-Man costume. The Alps Murders, as they're known in the UK. An English family on holiday in France are assassinated with an old pistol with accuracy that points towards a professional hit. A cyclist is found murdered in the same lay-by by the same weapon. The assassin thought they had tied up all loose ends until after 8 hours on the scene the French police found their 4-year-old daughter hiding under her dead mother's legs. 9 years later there's still no clue over who or why they were all murdered. What are the Mormons keeping in their vault that's surrounded in granite and heavily guarded? I used to work in the vault a very long time ago. Yes, I walked inside the mountain, through the vault door, multiple times per week. Here is the secret you've always wanted to know: inside the vault is genealogy records on microfiche. There are also antiques from the beginnings of the church that have some monetary value, but much more sentimental value to the church and its members. It also has a reservoir the size of a big room that collects water dripping from the bare rock. It is the most pure, oxygenated, delicious water I have ever tasted. It's a cool place, with bare rock for ceilings and walls, and a giant bank vault door that locks at the push of a button. Definitely unique, but I have been to Europe and seen castles, towns many hundreds of years old. I've seen a couple of the 7 natural wonders of the world, and all of those were more awe-inspiring than a man-made hole in the rock. But it's been damn near 30 years and I still crave that water. FYI, I no longer participate in the church, no bad feelings or trauma, just not a church-going personality. Everything I said is the truth. Who the hell killed Jeffrey E.P., and who were his clients? How we don't know the answer to this, and how no justice has been served, truly boggles my mind. Edit: to clarify, I mean justice served to his clients were a part of the whole scheme. There's clearly some big players involved that have the power to cover up all their tracks. This just goes to show how corrupt the US system is. Edit: to those of you saying there is no conspiracy here and that he killed himself, well, maybe so. But we know that he was involved in a sex trafficking ring. We even know several people who were on his flight logs, yet the public hasn't gotten any closure on a thorough investigation into any of these people. G. Maxwell said she has names of royalty, and politicians. Everything I see points to a catacomb of misdirection and corruption. There are 2 parties that control America. And key figures from both would have been implicated. No way in hell the truth will be heard for a generation or 2. Ever. The Kennedy assassination information is still not released. Maybe someday, in a few more generations. And they'll be disappointed at how mundane it all is. The problem with conspiracy theories is that they build a better narrative than the truth. The truth is, shit happens. The powers that be are nothing more than a smokescreen to cover up the fact that the feeling you have every day that you don't know what you're doing is felt by everyone, even those in power. We're all making it up as we go along, and sometimes we screw up. D.B. Cooper likely died in the forest and no one will find his body, or that money. Kennedy was shot by a guy in a book depository. That little girl was killed by someone close to her and the cops bungled the investigation. The plane went down in the ocean, and surprise, the ocean is fucking huge. All the people in power are just as dumb as you or I and most often make dumb decisions. The difference is their dumb decisions ripple in a much bigger pond. If I forget to pay a bill, my lights get shut off. If a world leader forgets a bill, people die. We like to make connections to make sense of this chaotic world, but the truth is the world is under no obligation to make sense to you. In 1994 I found a cinema ticket stub for Speed in my jacket pocket. I never saw Speed at the cinema, nor did I lend my jacket to anybody that had. I'd like to know where it came from so I can one day sit through the film without wondering about it. I would like John Walsh to be able to find the person who murdered his son, the reason behind Code Adam. Being raised in Florida in the 80s, this story was heard so many times. Now with what John Walsh has been doing my entire lifetime, and currently with Gabby Petito's case, I think he's more than earned it. The disappearance of Sandy Irvin and what's on the camera he was carrying. Sandy Irvin and George Mallory attempted to summit Everest in 1924. Mallory was discovered in 1999, but the body of Irvin is still missing. I don't remember what the case was called / nicknamed, but it is a missing 411 case. 3 friends were hiking a mountain, they were tied onto a line together. The 2 at the front noticed that the line got significantly lighter out of nowhere, so they pulled the line expecting to be met with weight of their friend. What they pulled up was a now severed end of rope and no friend in sight. They went back assuming they'd find their friend taking a break or something like that, but he was gone, nowhere to be found. What makes this case really weird is that the particular stretch they were on wasn't particularly steep, it was only slightly inclined and there were no steep falls nearby, yet he was gone as if he was picked up and removed from the mountain. The most they ever found of him was his backpack several miles off the path in a cave, which is weird all on its own because there was no plausible way he could have gotten there from where they were on the trail. I think about it at least once a week, what in the hell could have happened to him? Edit. I should add that yes, it's plausible this story is a hoax. I grew up in the middle of nowhere, so I know exactly how strange the woods can seem. It could be a hoax, it could be a murder, it could somehow be true. I'll never know, but that's why I want to know. I have a few. Also a fan of r/Unresolved Mysteries. Asher Degree, a 9-year-old girl goes missing in the middle of the night on the 14th of February 2000. Law enforcement is confident her family is not involved. Asher was a well-adjusted kid, played basketball, and had an excellent family support system. Not long after her disappearance, several witnesses believe they saw her walking alongside the highway the night she went missing, in the rain and dead of night. A year and a half later, the backpack she took with her was found buried at a construction site, and it included items that were not hers. Was it a grooming situation and she was abducted? Did she experience an intense sleepwalking episode? No one has seen her since that night. It's heartbreaking. The Springfield 3 is how most folks refer to the 1992 Missouri disappearance of Susie Streeter, 19 years old, her friend Stacy McCall, 18, and Susie's mother, Cheryl Leavitt, 47. Susie and Stacy spent the evening at high school graduation parties and ended up at Cheryl and Susie's for the night with the intention of going to a water park the next day with friends to celebrate graduation. The 3 women were never seen again. Their purses, Cheryl's cigarettes and dog, and clothes were found at the house. Friends who came to search for the girls found a broken porch light and obscene voicemail messages on the recorder. There are several theories but nothing proven. Finally, Abby Williams and Libby German were murdered in Delphi, Indiana on the 13th of February 2017. They spent a day off of school hanging out, were dropped at a popular local hiking trail for a fun couple of hours outside by Libby's older sister, and didn't arrive back at the trailhead for their pickup ride. The next day, the girls' remains were found not far from the trail. There are a lot of things about this case that really stick out. It's well known as Libby was able to get their killer briefly on camera before their tragic murder. They have photo and audio evidence of this man but have not been able to capture him. They encountered him on the Monon High Bridge, a former train bridge, and a very odd site for an abduction and murder. And finally, Libby's sister Kelsey sticks out to me as an example of an incredible sister. She works so hard to get information out about the case. She's studying to enter the justice system, and she puts in so much effort to keep her sister and Abby's memories alive. Highly recommend a Google and r/Unresolved Mysteries dive on all of these cases. The more people who know, maybe there's a better chance these can get solved and victims, friends and families can get some semblance of justice and closure.